Hey guys, welcome back. So, this is intro, I guess, 1A of this episode, and intro 1B is following. I recorded this episode at the latter part of basically what's now almost 2 weeks ago, and I went to post it the following week in the midst of thunderstorms and power outages. And what I thought had posted had actually not posted when I came back into the program today to record what I thought was going to be the second part of this episode. So I do apologize that at this point it has almost been a full 2 weeks since you got an episode from me. That was not the intention. I did seriously think this had posted because in between the power outages, I had seen success for something I was doing on my computer, but apparently the success message was not for posting the podcast. So I do apologize, but we are going to get back on track. So here is this week's episode, which was intended for last week. Hey guys, welcome back. In today's episode, we're going to be chatting about lead-based paint. So we're going to talk about what are some of the basic rules and regulations surrounding it, and what are some of the documents that you do need to have if you're choosing to rent out property that has lead-based paint. So stay tuned for this one. It's going to be jam-packed with a lot of information for you. Building a real estate portfolio is as much about buying properties as being a de facto entrepreneur. I'm Karina Ufinger. I'm a multi-property investor, rental management company CEO, and also a landlord coach. I'm going to show you the systems and knowledge you need to thrive as a real estate entrepreneur. From your first property purchase to building a portfolio of passive income where you work less than 5 hours a week, you'll learn the essential information and skills to build a profitable portfolio and live the life you truly want. Whether you are well on your journey or just starting out, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Landlord Chick podcast. So lead-based paint is either one of those things that you steer clear of it like the plague, or you're laissez-faire about it and you're okay with having lead-based paint in your rentals. Doesn't matter which side of the fence you fall on, I strongly encourage you to listen to this episode, because even if you've written it off, I want to have the opportunity to possibly change your mind in regards to lead-based paint. The reason I like to change people's minds about lead-based paint is because there's a large segment of properties that are written off by investors just because it was built before 1978 and there might be lead-based paint there. Because let's be honest, one of the most efficient ways to get into real estate as far as the quantity that is available on the market and the cost, it's going to be in the older properties, the ones that are from the 1950s, the 1960s, and even older than the 1950s. For many people, these are the easiest forms of real estate investing to get into, is buying a buy and hold that is from the older generations. This is why lead-based paint should not necessarily be written off as a bad thing, because you are taking away a large chunk of the available properties that could possibly get you into real estate and also help build your portfolio. Now, to give us all a little bit of background here, lead-based paint, the legislation that we have in regards to it, was created in the 1970s. And it applies to homes that were built prior to 1978. Lead was a very common ingredient in paint, basically from about the 1840s through the 1970s. And about the time of the late 1960s, early 1970s, we became wise to the effects of lead on the body. And we really began to understand that one of the biggest places that our children were getting lead-based poisoning was actually from the paint in homes and in rental units. So what the federal government did in conjunction with the EPA was they created the lead-based paint laws that we are subject to as landlords, but also as buyers and sellers of real estate. So just in case you didn't know, anytime you sell real estate that was built prior to 1978, you also have to make disclosures to the buyer about the possibility or the presence of lead-based paint. So even if you're just buying and selling, there has to be a lead-based paint disclosure for these properties. Now, of course, we're here talking about the landlord aspects. Now, what's important to note is that contrary to what some landlords think, we do not have a blank check of liability when it comes to lead-based paint. In fact, the legislation was created very, very particularly because they understood that it would be hard to hold us responsible for 130-ish years of other people's actions, because that's what it would have been. The law was created very specifically to give us the ability to limit our liability in instances of lead-based paint. And I think this was a very important aspect of the legislation that was passed. They didn't give a blank check for liability. This is probably one of the few things that we don't necessarily have full open liability for. In fact, it's very particular in this legislation, the steps we can take and should take so that we are in compliance with their regulations, but that also we are thus then reducing our liability to almost being non-existent. And in most cases, it actually is non-existent. So the EPA has certain, I don't want to say guidelines actually, because you really have to do this because you can be fined if you don't. But again, doing these things will reduce your liability. There is no blank check liability with lead-based paint. So in order to reduce your liability and to be in compliance with the EPA's rules, you must do the following. Number one, you must inform the tenant of the possibility of lead-based paint, or that you know for sure lead-based paint exists if you've had the property tested. So you have to inform them if you think it's there, there's a possibility, or you know it's there for sure. You do this in most cases using the lead-based paint addendum. You can get this from most any landlord form producer that exists out there. If you're here in Wisconsin, Wisconsin Legal Blank has their own form, the lead-based paint addendum, that you can purchase through their website. And this is what you're going to include in your rental packet. And this is your way of informing the tenant in compliance with EPA regulations what you know about the presence of lead-based paint. Now, there's two sections to this form. The top part is for the landlords. It gives you three options: that either you know there's lead-based paint and you've tested for it. Option two is you believe there may be lead-based paint here. And then depending on the form, there might be option three, which says I have not had the premises tested and I have no existing knowledge of lead-based paint, but because I'm giving you this form, it's pretty obvious there might be because the home's older than 1978. So the language up there depends on the form that you get. Now, the top part is your declaration. This is where you are fulfilling the EPA's requirements, that you declare to the tenant what you know. The bottom portion of this form, this is where the tenant is going to sign off on the fact that you've given this form, but then also you have given them what is called the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home packet. And giving them this packet is actually the second requirement from the EPA. So the EPA requires that you provide your tenants, for any housing built prior to 1978, a pamphlet they call the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. This packet is available either again online through any number of producers, or you can go the free option. You can go to epa.gov, you can download their PDF of it, and you can email it to your tenant, or you can go over to Copy Office Max or the UPS store, get it printed out. EPA.gov has the packet in both Spanish and English, and you can just download it there yourself and have the packet for free. Or else, if you really do prefer a nice bound copy of it, there are places online that you can find it for sale. Now, the EPA doesn't specify how you have to give it to them, so you could just get the PDF copy, email it to the tenant, and as long as they're signing off on that form, acknowledging that they got that packet, you have just taken care of part 2 of limiting your liability and also being in compliance with the EPA regulations. Now, part 3. Part 3 is making sure that you are addressing concerns regarding chipping and peeling lead-based paint in a timely fashion. If these concerns are brought to you from a tenant and they are in the common area or in the unit, it doesn't matter. You must address them in a timely fashion. Now, unlike what we see with like smoke detectors in a lot of states where you have like 3 business days or just 5 calendar days to address the issue, the other great thing about the legislation and how it was written is that they tell you a timely fashion. And that's because they understand that with lead-based paint issues, if you're not going to do the work yourself, or if you can't do the work yourself, it's not like you can just call up any old contractor and get them to come in and fix that. You're going to have to find people that are lead-based paint licensed. They are licensed in the remediation, or they are licensed to work with lead-based paint. And that's not just making a phone call and getting somebody in there the next day. So that's why they say in a timely fashion. So you do have to address issues of chipping and peeling paint in a timely fashion when they are brought to you by a tenant, or you notice them yourself. That's the other part of this. It's not just the tenant bringing it to you, but if you're walking your property and you're in the hallway and you see chipping and peeling paint, you need to address that. You don't just wait to address it until a tenant notices it. You actually need to start addressing it because you've noticed it. But if you do those 3 things, you use the lead-based paint addendum to signify that you have informed them of what your knowledge is regarding lead-based paint in the unit. You have given them the Protect Your Family from Lead packet, and you have addressed concerns that are brought to you or that you noticed in a timely fashion. By the way the law is written, you have taken care of everything the EPA asked you to do, and therefore you have drastically, severely limited your liability with lead-based paint. In fact, in most cases, has been proven to reduce your liability to zero. To zero. If you have followed these 3 things with every tenant, with every interaction regarding concerns of chipping and peeling lead-based paint, you have negated your liability to zero. That is the great thing about the way this legislation is written. It is not a blank check of liability that landlords are straddled with. There are limitations to your liability, and honestly, these are fairly simple things to follow. Now, of course, the next problem, if you would call it that, issue with lead-based paint is remediation. And that's another episode in itself. There are about 3 to 4 different ways that lead-based paint can be addressed when you do choose to remedy it, per se. And that's something we'll get into in the next episode, because this episode was just about understanding where your liability truly ends with lead-based paint and the simple steps that are required of you to have that significant and almost complete reduction in your liability. Next week, we'll get into some of the general ideas behind remediation so that if that's the next thing you're scared about, hopefully I can say a few things that are going to make you a little bit less afraid of lead-based paint, because you are truly cutting out a large chunk of the available properties that can get you into real estate or grow your portfolio exponentially, because these are also the properties that tend to be lower in price. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you next week for more discussion of lead-based paint.